Yes.
You've had experience with
Yes. And it will show
when you're ready to have to speak, that's the one. So the writing doesn't matter.
If you press too many times, then set them in press. So if you press too many times, tell them to come back to the queue and
It's like the elevator. If the elevators to the rooms, the floor numbers are tops.
Oh, really?
Nice.
Oh, okay.
Because I know a lot of people like to go. Yeah, we can be known for this. Yeah. That's right.
So why does this guy have a picture and the rest doesn't?
Oh, I think he's one of the Meetico guys. So he wants to, and he's
You know the
Italian, so he wants to look cool.
Meet Echo guys by name or?
What's that?
I don't know.
Well, they
Know the guys or they do.
a lot of them have Italian names. And I just figured that would be him. All right. So welcome everyone to the CDN Interconnection Working Group. We are starting. So yeah, Ray is going to give the blue sheets. So for the people on Meetico, do you hear us all right? Do you want to give us a little confirmation by chat that everything's fine from your side and you can hear us?
Kevin says loud and clear.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so we're in business. So first thing, oh, you want to change mode? So we have an official message to thank Barry, and the token is here. So this is on behalf of the Cdni working group. Thank you so much.
I'm developing quite the beer collection in my room. I'm trying to drink them, but I'm getting them faster than I can drink them. Thank you very much.
You need to be reasonable. And then we have a second thank you message for Barry. This is on behalf of the ICE working group. They're meeting right at the same time. So, we figured we'll work a solution. And there's no physical beer right now for you, but it's coming actually, this one. It'll be delivered. Okay. So, the working group chair, you know myself, François Lefaucheur, and Kevin Ma. Kevin is on the other side of Meetico today. He couldn't make it to this meeting. So Ray here is, stepping up to help me chair the session. Thank you, Ray. We just have one session. Obviously, we have a fantastic support from Meetico for this meeting, for remote attendance. Minute taker, Kent has accepted to take some minutes. We can probably work like that. If someone else wants to also take notes, that could help me, particularly when Kent is talking. No? Okay, I'll work with the audio recording then. That's and the blue sheets, they're going. All right. This is a Notewell statement. We took it from the IETF webpage. I will let you, recheck it quickly. I'll give you 30 seconds, and then we'll move on. But we'll assume that you understand all of that. If you do not understand all of that, you must read that to continue participating in the IETF, right? Well, we'll keep 30 seconds, but good enough. Okay, let's move on. So the agenda, you've seen it posted. We will, as usual, the chairs will do a little recap on where we are with documents, just so you get the high-level picture of the progress. Then we'll talk about Cdni logging. I will quickly present where we are, which I believe is the end. Then Kevin will remotely do a presentation on Cdni metadata. Kevin will also talk about the Cdni footprint and capabilities advertisement, semantics, not the interface, right, but the semantics he will cover. Then redirection interface, Ray will present on that. Then Rob will present remotely on the control interface. Then we'll talk about the URI signing. There's actually two presentations on URI signing, one for the main document, if I can call it that way, which is the working group document on URI signing. And then there's an individual's draft from Ray discussing extension to that solution for segmented content. And then there will be a presentation on the handling of HTTPS traffic by Frederic, continuing from our last meeting. And then we'll probably just wrap up, okay? So any comments or concern on the agenda before we get into it? Everybody's happy with it? Yes? Okay, let's go. So these are the published RFCs. I mean, there's only one really that was published since the last meeting. It's the one in bold at the bottom. That's the Cdni media type registration. It is RFC 7736 in the informational track. Now, for the other documents, so quickly, logging document, basically I believe it's concluded. I'll give you an update on the very last changes and the last IESG comments we got and how they were resolved, but they are resolved and we believe the document will go through. So all good there. Metadata, we'll get a presentation. The question we want to answer today is, can we move to working group last call? Is everything ready for that? For redirection, this has gone to the IESG review. Publication has been requested, and at high level, the IESG comments have come, and they're being resolved by the authors. So looking good. Control interface, pretty much same situation. It's gone for publication. We have the IESG review comments, at least the first ones, and they are being addressed gradually. So we'll get a detailed update on that. For the semantics document of the footprint and capabilities, it has also gone under IESG review, and the comments are being addressed. So again, looking good there. Then the URI signing, well, we'll discuss if we actually, well, sorry, let me start with the first document. So the working group document has progressed well. I believe pretty much all the open items have been addressed. So the question we will be asking to this group is, are we ready to move for working group last call? Okay. And then we'll discuss how we want to deal with the work that Ray is progressing on, again, the extension to URI signing for segmented content. And there is a little update on the IPR that Ray is going to give us, and we'll be asking a question to the group as to whether we want to change the decisions we made earlier based on the previous IPR. Then there are two documents that are currently beyond our identified milestones. The Cdni rate pacing, it hasn't moved since last time, but Matt, who's driving that document, was waiting for the other documents to stabilize. I think we're at that point, so I'll see whether Matt wants to now close that document, bring him in line with the other specs and publish it. So perhaps at the next meeting it will come. And then we have again the topic of handling of HTTPS traffic. There's no explicit milestone for that. However, we did poll the working group for a sense of interest in that work, and when we did that, I can't remember if it was last meeting or the one before, but when we did, there was a fairly strong indication from the working group that there was interest in progressing that work. It was important to have a solution for that. So I think we'll have to discuss how we want to go from here on HTTPS handling. Okay, that's it for the documents. Any question at high level on where we are? All good? Okay. Fantastic. So Cdni logging, I'll start. So we want all the presenters, by the way, thank you, to stand in this pink square so that they guess the best video is provided to the Meeteco remote attendees. So I'll give you try to do the right thing. Okay, Cdni logging version 24 or 25 actually I published this. Oh, I can control with that, sorry, right? This is way too high for me.
It's the other.
Yeah. All right, so what were the changes between version 22 and 23? We changed or clarified the text on the mapping approach with respect to the C group ID. Remember, the C group ID is what replaces the IP address that used to be the way to identify endpoints, and we, after all the privacy design work, we replaced the IP address by the C group ID, which is a way of representing endpoints in an aggregate format, right? And there's different flavors of what can be indicated in the C group ID. One of them involve mapping, and involves a mapping where you can actually map back to individual clients. It's not the recommended form, but it is possible. And we agreed we needed to describe that mapping approach much more clearly, and that was done. There was also discussions about whether that mapping approach would be mandatory to implement or optional, and we actually concluded that we would say this method may be implemented, right? And the reason we didn't push it harder is because the whole SPANC is trying to encourage the privacy-friendly approach to be used, which does not involve a solution where IP addresses can be mapped back, right? The recommendation is to have a solution with aggregates which cannot be mapped back to individual addresses. Here, what we're talking about is when we don't follow the recommended approach, but instead have a solution where IP addresses are encrypted, but you can map them back to individual IP address. So when you do that, then we describe the way to do that. But we only made that a may implement because we didn't want to sort of encourage people we didn't want people to get the wrong message that we would encourage them to implement that and to deploy that. So we decided to make that a may implement, okay? And then there was some text that Kevin provided to deal with extensions to the Cdni logging records, right? So there's two ways they can be extended, and now that's clearly described. Okay, so those were the changes from 22 to 23. They were somewhat significant, right? Not a huge thing, but they had some real content in them. It's not just editorial. Then we had the review from Alyssa Cooper, and that's what triggered the changes from version 23 to 24. Two significant changes. One is to add text with respect to recommendation, basically because Alyssa pointed out that we had done a good job at discussing privacy and how to protect privacy in terms of dealing with IP addresses and aggregation of those and hiding those, okay? But then there was a little inconsistency because there was, when you log headers, then you could very well carry back information, individual IP addresses, which are sometimes or often included in these headers. Okay, so there was already some text there that was provided by Stephen Farrell to talk about how you need to be careful in terms of privacy when logging headers. But we added another paragraph that Alyssa provided, particularly focusing on drawing the correlation between the effort you make in terms of protecting privacy with the C group ID and the effort you make to protect it on the headers. And it sort of doesn't make sense to do a lot of effort on one side if you don't do it on the other side, because you're going to re-expose everything. So the extra paragraph is saying that doing one without being careful on the other is not so useful. You want to do both. And the second change was that we added a statement to clarify that the time value in the log is actually meant to be expressed in UTC. It was implied by a lot of people, but it was not actually said. So we added that. And finally, this morning, I posted a version 25 to close the last little nit, which is that, in this statement that the time is to be expressed in UTC, we actually made that a must as opposed to just a descriptive text. Okay, so that's been out. My understanding is that now all the IESG review comments and discussers have been, well, all the discussers have been closed, all the comments that were significant have been addressed. So I think the document is ready to go, at least from the author's perspective. Okay, any question, comment on the logging document? All right, thank you.
Then we'll have Kevin. Are you online, Kevin?
So I think we have to press the button,
I
no?
think he has to be, yeah, there he is.
Can you see me? Can you hear
Yeah.
me? Oh, neat. Crazy. I can't see you. I lost the video, but I don't get any of the feedback. So, Cdni metadata. We did one update since the previous. Can I control the slides, or I don't know how?
I don't know. We're looking at the first slide right now. I don't know if you can see them or.
I can see them, but I don't know how to change them. So, if you could go to the next slide, Rich.
We'll drop them for you from here, Kevin, if you don't mind.
Perfect. Thanks. So at the last IETF, we agreed that we would do one more read through of the document. So I did that. We were hoping to get to last call before Buenos Aires. We didn't get that in, but we did get one revision in before the deadline. I did a full read through and made a bunch of editorial changes, fixed a bunch of typos, and cleaned up some of the examples. Cleaned up the RFC 2119 language. There were a bunch of lowercase mays that all got changed out of the document. One change that was made was for host match host. I changed the type from string to endpoint. Endpoint is a string that can be a host name, an IP address, IPv4 address, or IPv6 address. Host match host had the exact same text in it as a string, so I just changed it to be an endpoint. I don't think it changes it functionally. We clarified when you don't need link types, updated the registries so that it matches all the other documents, fixed the normative references. And then one of the actions from IETF 94 was to review the privacy section. And so I went back through it and added a statement in there about how we should care about being able to monitor what the DCDN is serving, and that we should use encryption and authentication to prevent someone from sticking a man in the middle and snooping that traffic. That's about it. Next slide, please. So there was one question that the authors were discussing. At some point in the past, we decided to make versioning explicit in all of the metadata objects. So all the object payload types have a .v1 on the end. None of the other documents are doing this. And so this question, which is, we could go either way on, was should we make .v1 implicit and just start versioning with .v2s? If we wanted to do that, we can update the text and change all the payload type registrations. It would make payload type slightly less verbose. And if we had specified everything perfectly and never have to rev these, then that would be great. Or we can just leave the text as it is. We don't have a real strong opinion. We were wanting to know if anyone in the working group had a strong opinion on this. If so, you can jump to the mic.
Yeah, so anyone want to comment on that? No, Kevin. I think
Okay.
they're looking at you to decide.
All right, so we'll pick one or the other. And other than that, I think we're ready for last call.
Yeah, so, I mean, I agree. I think we're ready for working group last call. Just for memory, at the previous meeting, we already discussed about moving to working group last call. We said that perhaps it would be good to have a chair review, which I think means a review by myself. It hasn't happened, but there's no reason why it couldn't happen at the same time as the working group last call. So, let me ask everyone here. The proposal is to move this document to working group last call. Does anybody have an objection to that, or any concern on the document? Okay, everybody's cool. So we'll do that after this meeting. We'll issue the working group last call, and I'll try to do my review in that time frame as well. Thank you, Kevin. So next, it's still you, Kevin, on
Okay.
the footprint capabilities advertisement.
Okay, next slide, please. So after IETF 94, we did 4 updates. -09 was the outstanding edits that we had left that we mentioned at IETF 94. So we did those. And then Francois did a chair review for us. So we updated for -10. When the media type RFC was published, we did an update with -11 just to fix that reference. And then with -12, we had gotten an AD review from Barry. Thank you. I hope you enjoy your beer. And we took that version and submitted it to the IESG for publication. Next slide, please. So since the deadline, we have received some IESG comments. There was a comment from Jen Art asking why this was informational and not standard, and we had the discussion as to the semantics versus the protocols. There was a suggestion that we update the milestones in the charter. Francois, we can take that up if you'd like. Sector asked about a sentence in the security considerations which said that we didn't think there was any privacy concerns. But to the point, we don't actually know until we finish the other protocol draft. So I removed that sentence and put in a statement that requires confidentiality. It seems to be in line with all of our must-use TLS anyway, so it didn't seem like a big deal. And then Opster pointed out a couple of nits as well. So on Monday, I uploaded 2 versions because I screwed up the first one, but 13 and 14 are there with all the changes from the comments we've gotten so far. The next steps are just to continue addressing any additional comments that come in and then wait for approval.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks,
everyone.
sorry, Kevin. Out of the comments that you've had so far, is there anyone that you think is significant and not covered yet?
No, they were mostly nits except for the sector comment asking about confidentiality. So we just made encryption required.
Okay, so mostly when you say continue to address, you mean address the one that will come, basically.
Yes, if new comments come in. We have addressed all the comments that have come in so far.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Kevin, so that was for FCI semantics.
Correct.
Can you comment on what could happen for the FCI interface from there?
So I haven't done any updates on mine, and I haven't talked to Jan recently. So I'll hook up with Jan and find out if we should be able to get an update on the protocol drafts for Berlin now that
Right.
these are all settled.
Because now that semantics is virtually frozen, there's no reason the proposal cannot move fairly fast, right?
Agreed. Yes.
All right. So we'll, please remind also directly yourself when you speak to Jan. But let's say we'll be hoping and expecting from you two an update on the protocol interface.
Yep.
Thank you.
So then we'll go to the redirection draft. There's been 4 new versions since the Yokohama meeting. We went to IESG review, which we're currently in the middle of. I don't know if John's here, but we fixed John's comments, which they took a long time to fix, but in the end, I think we managed to come to an agreement. We fixed the security recommendations. As you know, in most of the Cdni documents, there were some discussions on the use of TLS and where to make it mandatory or where to make it a must or a should or whatever. But we fixed that, and this document is now in line with the rest of the documents, so with the logging spec and the control spec. We added the registry so that we can add additional responses in the future if necessary. There was a JSON review which made some changes, and we've had a Shepard and I think Barry did a review as well, and we fixed all those comments in the version 17, which is now the current version. So as I mentioned, we're now in the process of addressing the rest of the IESG comments. The big elephant in the room there is privacy. And I think privacy, especially for this document, is pretty fundamental. And the idea there, and I guess the main problem here is the fact that basically the entire premise of the redirection draft is the fact that a UCDN, it asks the DCDN whether it wants to redirect a specific piece of content for a specific client.
Right. Sorry to interrupt. Alexei, I just wanted to draw your attention to that point because, I can see that this may very well be the one contentious point out of the IESG review for that document. There's already discussions that have started, and as Ray just said, it's a pretty fundamental question. By definition, that interface, makes a request which exposes some information which are needed for that request. Okay. So at the same time, some people are concerned because, out of making many individual requests, someone on the other side could store that and gather information in a single location. And then we have this concern that we had before where there's lots of information in one place.
I think it's broader than that in this case. I think it's actually the case that was brought up in the IESG comments was the fact that by definition, this interface exposes an IP address to another party, basically. So the UCDN tells the IP address to the DCDN, which the DCDN in most cases would use to select a surrogate, for example. So in this case, what you could do, for example, you could mask it, right? You could say, well, we'll strip off the last 16 bits, for example, of the client IP address, which would make the interface itself slightly less accurate. Maybe not accurate, but well, it changes the property of the interface itself. And the question is how you want to deal with that. One way would be to use the same solution we use in the logging draft, which is basically to define some kind of aggregate. Instead of the actual IP address, we could communicate a bit masked version of that by, for example, stripping off the last 8 or 16 bits. Another solution would be to talk about some other type of aggregate. But in all cases, basically, if we would do that, we would reduce the number of use cases which the redirection interface could be used for. For example, if you would do that, it's no longer possible to correlate a request, an incoming request in the DCDN with a previous request over the redirection interface. So if we're okay with that, that's fine, but that should be, that's a pretty fundamental change to this document.
And then, Ray, one potential suggestion is to handle it the same way as the logging document, in a sense that you may have more than one option. So
yes.
you describe several options, maybe you allow more than one. And the upstream CDN, DCDN, they agree on their trade-off between privacy versus other use cases. And that's exactly what we ended up doing for logging. So
yeah, agreed. So is there anybody in the room here that's, I mean, has an opinion on this, like a comment? Maybe in the Meet Echo room? Okay, if that's not the case, then I think there's Kevin. I think you should press the red button.
I'm not really sure how to step up to the mic, so I'm just gonna project myself to all of you. So one of the comments that Stephen had was about just the general tone of the document. And I went back and looked, it goes back to the original version of the individual draft, where we put in, you should give as much information to the DCDN as possible in order to make that decision. I don't know if there's a way for us to, I haven't given it a full read through again, but can we change the tone of the document and still allow for all of the information to be sent, but not be as suggestive that it's okay to send it all? I don't know, can we say, you need these pieces of information, it will be helpful to send these pieces of information, but put the caveat in that there's a privacy concern with sending them, but not prevent ourselves from sending them, and not have to encrypt every single thing that we put in, since it's already going over TLS and being encrypted in transport.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, we should definitely look at the tone. I agree. Yeah.
Yes, Kevin. I mean, I also agree. Certainly, it sounds wrong to say always give as much as possible. And the key thing should be that there is a trade-off. We want to explain there is some sort of trade-off between giving everything and being more privacy friendly. So we should talk about that trade-off. Again, I think we may end up having to allow different pair of upstream CDN and downstream CDN to pick different combination or different sweet spots, right? So maybe some would expose the full IP address deliberately, some would work on an aggregate, because a less accurate routing decision may be acceptable and they prefer to protect privacy. And I had another comment on something you said, which I didn't quite agree. Oh yeah, you said, you talk about the fact that all of that is encrypted into TLS. So that's all good. But I think that's not the number one concern that was expressed in the ISG review. The concern is not that another party get access to the information. We must prevent that, and TLS, I think, will do a good job at that. But even if it's protected, then the question is, giving all this information to the downstream CDN, is that potentially a breach of privacy, right?
I guess for logging, we were saying that this is a persistent data that's stuck in a file somewhere that someone could steal. In the routing interface, if it's ephemeral and we're just passing it to the DCDN so it can make its decision, if it's not storing it, then it's going to have that information in memory either way. As long as it doesn't put it somewhere where someone can steal it ex post facto, then it shouldn't matter if it's encrypted or not, since it was encrypted in transport.
Yeah. Now the point is we don't know what the downstream CDN does, but perhaps that's an avenue. Perhaps that's where we could make a recommendation. Recommend that this information doesn't get stored.
I think the main issue was not so much the fact that whether you store that information or whether you log it. It's more the fact that you give it to an external party, which doesn't necessarily.
I don't understand that comment. I mean, a HTTP request is exactly that. You send a message to a server with your IP address. You give a lot of information to that third party. So there's going to be more than just.
Well, there are some cases where, for example, if the DCDN would reject the request, for example, it would have gained information it otherwise wouldn't have. And there are some other cases as well. And I still believe that, I mean, I agree, I think, but those are the comments, or at least part of the comments. It's not just the fact that we store it. And we do send everything over TLS or whatever other security.
So it sounds a little bit like the first thing we had to do with logging was to actually try to understand the concerns that the ADs had about privacy, because we don't know if the information is leaked, we don't know that if it's stored, we don't know and aggregated together, or if it's that somebody else has accesses it. So perhaps that would be a good thing to start discussing with the idea that are providing these comments.
Great.
Please.
Sanjay Mishra. I think quick question here. So I think I'm just guessing here. I've not read the original comment, but I think is the concern here that the redirection is happening from the upstream CDN to potentially to the downstream CDN? Is that where the concern comes from?
Yes, basically what this draft specifies is a mechanism that allows the UCDN to ask the DCDN whether it wants to be redirected to. So it's not the actual redirection, it's asking it whether it wants to be redirected to now or in the future. And in order to give the DCN sufficient information to answer that question, one of the things you tell it is the client IP address, along with some other information as well.
To put it very simply, what that interface does is it allows the upstream CDN to say to the downstream CDN, I got a request, I would like to redirect it to you, here's the IP address, here's the URL, here's blah, 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 everything you have in the request. Please, Mr. Downstream CDN, tell me exactly where you want me to redirect that request. So the downstream CDN says, I know everything about that request. I know I want it to be handled by my server in the west pop of Buenos Aires. So I'm going to somehow provide that information in a response, and the upstream CDN can directly send the request to the right pop in the downstream CDN in the west side of Buenos Aires, right? So by definition, you want to give enough information for the downstream CDN to make a smart decision. Question is, is that too much information, and what exactly is the concern? Because again, as Ray pointed out, once you actually have completed that redirection request, then the next thing that will happen is that the client will be told, go to the server in Buenos Aires, and it will issue the actual request, which has all that information anyways. Okay, so the downstream CDN is going to get all the information because it's going to serve the request. So what's the big deal about exposing that information, 200 milliseconds before when it makes the redirection request? This is just to sort of position the debate. Kent?
Sorry, just wondering, it's a concern because technically there could be slightly differences between the first request and the last request, right? In a sense, it's possible that the client IP probably changed because you're using a different interface to reach the final the surrogate, basically, right? So I don't know if that was part of the concern or not.
I don't think so. No, I didn't see that.
No.
So I think one of the things was we asked if we could have someone from security, come and give us comments on what exactly we should be looking at, like we did with the logging.
Yes.
And so, looking at Alexi, though I can't see him in the video, that may be something.
He's walking up to the mic, so he could tell you were looking at him.
Yeah, I think it would have been useful to have a chat with Steven this week, but it's already Thursday, so I don't think there is much time.
No, and
or at least it would have been nice to invite him here for this discussion.
yeah. But Alexei, what Kevin is pointing out is we sort of face the same challenge in logging. Steven was one of not the only one, but several ADs made comments, and they're coming from a privacy angle without necessarily understanding the full CDN architecture. And in this room, we have a lot of people understanding the CDN thing without necessarily understanding what exactly are the privacy concerns. We try to talk like that with Steven one-on-one it was very difficult to converge. And Stephen made a suggestion. He said, let's put a design team. We'll give you 2 experts at security and privacy, and take 2 or 3 Cdni experts. You work as a team, you come up with a solution. We did that for logging. I thought it was fantastic. The document is much better than it was, and there were very reasonable discussions because everybody tried to understand each other. Now, what Kevin and I think Ray were suggesting that is just to do the same. I mean, could we have 1 or 2 person who can dedicate a bit of time to understanding CDNs, help us work out the compromise? That was very effective. I mean, maybe we could, if perhaps it's a lot of bandwidth from them, but if we could have the same person that worked on the logging, I mean,
Yeah,
to
do
me,
you know who the people were?
oh yes, I worked with them, so I should know. Rich
Brian
Salz,
Trammell and Rich Salz.
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Brian Trammell is the other one.
Just send me email
Okay.
with a reminder on this, and we'll.
Okay, so the action item is to see whether we could get them to help us make the right trade-off again, right?
Yep.
Thank you.
And that's it. The next step is to address the comments and yeah.
Thanks, Ray.
Then we'll have Rob presenting remotely. Rob. Rob, are you there?
Let me try with
try to ping him,
Let me take one.
Yeah, there he is.
I got it. Hi.
Hello, we see you and we hear you.
Excellent. Perfect. So, first slide, please. I can only see the. Okay. So yeah, updates since the last meeting. The first pair were addressing comments from Barry. So several editorial fixes. There's a section in there that formalizes the JSON that got moved to an appendix, so it's not normative. And a couple of references changed from informational to normative. And next slide. Okay, the second update was security and ISG comments. So the big change was adding a descriptive section in really about the way the CDNs can be interconnected, which is, I think, more of an issue for the triggers than the other interfaces. So the problem comes when there's one authoritative CDN for some content. It's delegating to 2 directly connected CDNs, and they both delegate to another CDN. So there's diamond shape in the connection. And that means that commands can arrive from the 2 upstream CDNs in the bottom CDN in the diamond, and they can arrive out of order. So need to think about that a little bit. So the section there just describes the hierarchy that you can get and discusses the issues. I think there's more on that on the next slide as well. The security considerations had a couple of updates, and I can't remember what the last point was on the other slide. Sorry. Yes, just a few more editorial, including changing HTTP to HTTPS in the examples. So, sorry, the next slide.
Sorry, Rob, for interjecting, but on the previous point, TLS security, blah blah blah.
Yep.
There was a tiny change again on that text in the logging document as a result of the last AD.
Yes, I did see that, so I'll include it in the next update. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so. Yeah, the text on these diamond configurations. The downstream CDN can probably tell where its metadata's come from by the URLs it's used to get them, and they'll be stored in the metadata. but it may not remember where the content came from. So if commands come down from one of its multiple directly connected CDNs, it probably has to act on data that it might have acquired from other ones. And if commands are taking multiple routes to that most downstream CDN, it might end up doing some of these actions more than once. So I think that's inefficient, but not incorrect in general. So if something is invalidated, it might be invalidated more than necessary, revalidated more than necessary. If it's purged and then purged again, that's also wasteful, but not necessarily incorrect. And if there's a purge followed by a preposition, some data may get a preposition twice. So yeah, the new text just really says this configuration can be inefficient. I don't think it's a big concern, not something we want to deal with straight away at least, because it's probably a fairly unlikely situation. And the most downstream CDN can always get hold of content again if it is deleted more than once. The other thing it doesn't deal with is misbehavior. So CDN deliberately trying to be wasteful in its connected CDN isn't catered for in the draft. Because there's a trust relationship between the two CDNs anyway. So that was that one. Next slide. Okay, so some more editorial comments from sector, and we need to make sure the ISG comments get closed down.
This is Barry. This is a general thing for anyone who's document editing. When you get IESG comments during IESG evaluation leading up to the telechat, it's customary to reply to them as soon as you can, preferably right after they're made, to try to address them in the message you send, or at least thank the ADs for their comments and let them know that you're working on anything that they've raised. When they're discusses, that particularly means discuss it with them. Sometimes I know it's tempting to just, oh yeah, I see what they're saying, I'll go make a change in the document, as you did for Alyssa's discuss. As far as I could tell, you never discussed it with Alyssa. You just made some changes and threw them back and said, here, I think this addressed your comments. And so far I see that Alyssa hasn't responded to your message that said that.
Yeah.
It's generally a better idea to engage the AD in a discussion, even if it's brief, because we don't always want you to make changes directly. It may be something we don't understand, or something where we want some give and take. So that's a general comment for everybody. For you in particular, I haven't seen any response to Ben's comments, and it would be good to do that. Even if you've already addressed them, it would be good to do that. And please follow up on the message you sent to Alyssa, reminding her that you've made changes for her to discuss. Could she please look at them and see if they work for her?
Yeah, will do. Apologies for that. I left it too late to have the discussion. Needed to just get the document in before the deadline. So yeah, I will do all that, and didn't realise I'd missed a set of comments. So yeah, no problem.
Alexei, another sort of related discussion. If you can actually resolve discusses during the review week, it's much easier because area director is still thinking about the problem.
Yep.
If you don't reply until 3 weeks later, then 3 weeks might become 6 weeks because they're already reviewing other documents, so they might have forgotten about. So just try to engage in discussion as soon as you can, and a lot of things they're much easier to actually fix, or at least provisionally agree how to address things during the review week.
Yeah, sure.
Right, that's part of what I was getting at. That even if you don't have the time to actually make the changes, if you have the discussion, the AD still remembers what they were on about, where after a while they've lost context.
Sorry.
It sounds like we're beating you up, but we're not.
No, actually, no. This is unrelated thing, but Barry balloted yes on the document, and nobody else has balloted yes. So I actually now need to go review, potentially have my own comments and ballot yes on it. So I'm sorry, I might be adding a little bit to the pile, but once I actually read the document, I will understand better, discuss it by other ADs. So I might help. If I disagree with them, I might be able to help you, disagree with them, or I might agree with them. I might be able to suggest some text, but basically I'll need to review documents now.
Yeah, Barry, one more time. That's there. Three of your document, not Rob's. Three of this working group's documents are still in the IESG evaluation state, which means that my yes ballots on all of those documents go away, and they're still in the data tracker, but they don't count. And Alexei has to review those and put his own yes ballot on them in order to go forward. And most likely he will, but as he says, he may have comments and. It gets to be annoying, but there it is.
But anyway, as a chair, it's a good time because there's way more work on the ISG's hands than on the chaired hands. I love that. This is a good time.
Any other things, Rob?
No, that's me done, I think.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Kent, I think it'll be you next. So we'll move to the URI signing discussion now.
I'll give an update. Okay. On URI signing. So I guess last time Lee and Phil gave a good review comment. So we've gotten, we got some good suggestions in there. So we wanted to incorporate some of them to improve basically the draft. Okay, there you go. Okay, so since the last one, some of the key concepts that we incorporated, one is the UI pattern. The idea there is that instead of what we did before was we had just a single URI that we used the signature for. But what we wanted to do actually to be able to protect a whole pattern, right? So the idea is that to be able to match entire pattern of the URI, so that way we can, basically protect not just one, right? So that's something that we added. The other part was supporting, the issue with privacy and the logging interface came up, and also came up for URI signing. So the idea there is that in URI signing, we are embedding the client IP address basically in the URI package, and that's available, right? So the idea there was basically let's encrypt that to be able to, so it's obfuscated basically. On top of that, not just IP address, but also be able to support entire prefix. For URI signing. So these changes, key changes actually had to be incorporated throughout the draft, in many sections. So I kind of identify where the sections we mostly touched to incorporate that. So we actually had to introduce new IEs in the enforcement IE section, IEs in the signature computation IE section. As far as even for creating the signed URI, we had to change it from what it was before, just to be able to really handle the URI pattern case, right? So what we did before was that you had the original URI, then you embed all the IEs, and then you calculate basically a hash over that and be able to get your signature. So when we had to support the URI pattern, what we did is that we wanted to follow the same model. So we did throw all the IEs, but then after the IEs is where we kind of added the protected URI, which would be the original UI or the UI pattern, basically, that's supposed to be matching a set of URIs. So, and that's what we actually calculate for the signature. And that's what basically was changed in the procedure for computation section. And of course, for the signature validation, we had to do the inverse of that to make sure it works. The Cdni logging interface section was changed, and as well as the privacy, especially dealing with the client IP. Okay, so a little bit more about the client IP address. So what actually specifically, right? So as I mentioned, we did the for client IP as well as the prefix. we introduced the client IP encryption algorithm. So that way it allows you to specify what the algorithm is to be able to encrypt that IP address or prefix. We introduced the client IP key ID. That's the identifier to retrieve the key to be able to do the encryption. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong button. Okay. So for support for UI patterns, so we introduced the original UI container, the OUC-IE. That's used to protect the original URI, right? So that IE is used to when you're actually calculating the hash, but actually that IE is not carried in the package when it's sent across because the original URI is already part of the URI, right? So that part's not there, but it's mainly to be able to use to calculate the signature. We also introduced the UI pattern container, the UPC IE. So that's the new one, which basically embeds the pattern matching string, basically, right? So there's some literals that were used to represent either one character or a string of characters for the pattern matching. And that is actually also embedded in the package as it's sent across. So that way, when the receiver, downstream CDN, can verify that by using that pattern and verifying the UI to match that. Okay, so that was done for the version that we published, I guess, a month ago.
In January.
January. So that was out there for a while. We cleaned it up, I would say, in the next version, which actually just came out this past week. It missed the deadline. So, but it's more of, I would say, editorial changes as well as just clean up from the procedural perspective. So the key sections that changed were, one is the calculating, the procedure for calculating the signature. It was 2 sections before. Now we've changed it to 4 to kind of indicate the set of steps in each section to do. For example, the first part will be composing the URI IEs with the protected URI, right? Then with that, then you compute the URI signature, how to go about doing that. And then you encode the URI package, and then you assemble the whole URI design URI basically before you send it out, right? So 4 distinct steps to achieve that. Good. I don't know why. Oh, it wasn't moving. Sorry. Okay, so then the other part was kind of the validation part, right? So it was changed from 3 sections to now 5 sections. Again, this is kind of distinctive in the set of steps that we want to do. The first part is to extract and decode the URI package that came from the design URI. Then we extract the IEs that are part of that package. From the IEs, we have all the information we needed to kind of obtain the obtain the entire URI IEs plus the protected URI. Now we have the whole entire thing to be able to calculate the signature, and then we validate to make sure that it matches what came across. And then after that, we can then do the enforcement of the distribution policy. So that was kind of the key sections. Kevin really provided basically the entire section updated for the INF consideration. So here, what we did was that we added a new we added URI signing to the Cdni payload type registry. And it's a Cdni record type version 2 to extend for Cdni logging version 1. So that way we can include the URI signing logging fields as well. Then we added the URI signing fields to the field names registry. There's 2 fields there. And then we created the sub-registries for the Cdni parameters for all the IEs that we had introduced in this draft. So thanks for Kevin. I think that section is now done. So as far as the next steps, so at this point, we think we've addressed most of the key issues that were brought up last time. And I think there's a few things I think we're planning to do. One is that we're awaiting a kind of security error review early. Well, supposed to be early, but Brian Weiss volunteered or been volunteered to do that, so he'll do the review of the document. I think that there's a few more things. One is that Phil brought up on the mailing list, basically, kind of the path option, right, instead of the query option. So I think we still probably need to, address that part. And then there are also the point of implementation, as far as, it would be nice to know, I don't know if people want to speak, or I can mention it.
Well, we can ask Leaf to mention something.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's good
if that's
people
okay.
Can mention if they've done some implementation of the draft.
Leaf, do you want to comment on that? You don't have to.
We can just say.
No pressure, of course.
This is Leif Hedström, Apple. Yeah, so we actually have an implementation of this. It's implementing almost everything out of the 07 draft,
Okay.
Except for the asymmetric keys.
Okay.
It's still being tested and a little bit sort of cleaned up, but we hope to have this open sourced in the Apache community about probably mid-May.
Great, thank you.
And Ray, did you want to say something? Well, okay. Ray is planning to do some implementation as well.
Yeah.
In the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, 4 to 6
basically.
weeks time.
Yeah. And so I think it's good because there are a lot of little details in the draft, right? And especially we've gone through some revisions basically at this point. And it's great to have somebody actually validate it through implementation. So I'm kind of glad there's at least 2 here. And if there's anybody who's doing implementation, let us know. Any other?
Yeah, well, so let's agree on the plan. I mean, I think the document is ready to move to working group last call, particularly because I've obtained a commitment from Leaf and Phil that they would review the document again as part of the working group last call. Since a lot of the recent changes are coming from some of their comment, that's a good thing. Now, you said there's still a few things that we probably want to wait before we launch the last call. I think you said there's one comment you want to work on.
Yeah.
We should probably wait for Brian Weiss's review, right? Yeah. Hopefully that can come relatively quickly. I asked him, you've seen, and he said he's going to get onto it. And then maybe since you guys are working on implementation, it might be good to give a few more weeks of time for these implementations to go right through the end of the spec. So then if if they discover issues, we can work them out. So why don't we say that you basically we'll issue the working group last call once you've addressed the comments from Brian, once you've addressed the last comment that remains, and if there's any comment from the implementers in the meantime. And we'll have a target for that of what, 6 weeks from today. Then we have time before the next meeting to work on whatever comments we may get from the working group last call. Sounds good? So is everybody comfortable with that plan? Yep. Very good.
All nodding, so, yep.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I had. That's next part of your assignment.
Yeah, so that was, remember the working group document, Ken just talked about the working group document on URI signing, and now Ray is going to talk about the extensions to that document for handling specifically segmented content.
So I'll give a short update on what happened 1 or 2 meetings ago. I think it's useful to have this background information. Basically, the reason we started this work was that, as you all know, a lot of the content that's being delivered right now is adaptive bitrate streaming content, segmented content, and not all of the stuff that we have in the URI signing spec works for that type of content. And it has to do with the fact that you have sort of a manifest file, and there's a lot of redirection, and you don't go through the content provider again. So in order to solve that problem, about a year ago, we started this work as an extension of the main URI signing spec to make sure that chaining of these tokens, of these signed URIs, work for segmented content as well. This work was merged into version 4 of the draft that Kent just presented. And then about a couple of months ago, we had an incoming KPN statement, which basically said that there was a possible royalty or fee for that specific extension. And then we had a hum test on that in Dallas, and we decided to take it out again of the main spec. A few things happened since then. We've had several liaisons from the Impact Dash community. The last one was a month ago. You can check it out on the website. I won't repeat it here. And they're still interested in making sure that their Dash specification works together with our URI signing thing, which would be a good thing. And because of that, I've had long discussions with KPN on trying to convince them to reconsider these IPR terms. And well, I'll let you decide to see whether that was successful or not. Basically, this is the new IPR terms, and basically what it says right now is that blah blah blah. If the standard is adopted, they will. If the standard is adopted, KPN will not assert any patents controlled by KPN for sale of a server or other CDN product implementation of the standard. And I think that's the important part. It's the server or CDN product implementation. And that's limiting. Basically, what we describe in the draft is only the server side. So in that sense, the draft itself is well without royalty or fee. But of course, we all know that there's also a client part somewhere. And this IPR statement doesn't say anything about the client, which will most likely be this dash thing. So I think what we now need to decide is. Do we want to reconsider? Does the working group want to reconsider the decision to not work on the segmented content thing, given the new IPR terms, or do we want to do that? I think this is where I will hand over to Francois.
Yes. So can you move? Well, I'll do it. Okay. So I mean, at the risk of laboring the point, I'm basically going to restate what Ray has said in different words because I want everybody to understand. So this is proposed new IPR terms from KPN to try to, offer a more acceptable IPR statement, so that we may be willing to reincorporate the extensions about segment and content as part of the working group document material. So, everybody should read that carefully, but if I can summarize it in simple terms, basically the step forward they've made towards us is to say, we will now make it license-free, royalty-free for server implementations. Okay, that's what this says. What this doesn't say, but one can imply, is that they do not commit to having no license, no royalty for the endpoints. Okay, so I guess as a chair I should stop there. I mean, later I'll come and I'll give you my personal opinion at this microphone, but I think that's what I want to make clear from that document. They're basically saying, okay, on the server side, on the CDN side, KPN is willing to forego the licenses and royalties, obviously subject to the same defensive terms than the rest of the IPR. So, they've changed the IPR statement, and the question is, do we want to change our earlier decision? Okay, so perhaps let's talk a little bit about it, and then we've prepared some simple home tests to try to go through that question. But let's have an open discussion first. Barry.
I'm Barry Lee, but you just said that the last thing you said was what I was looking for. You said they've changed the IPR statement.
Yes.
This says proposed new IPR terms. How were these proposed?
Okay, so
were they proposed by updating the IPR statement?
They are proposing to these new terms, and if they were acceptable to the working group, to the point that we would, accept to include the extensions for segmented content into our working group material, then they would update the IPR. They have not updated yet the IPR.
That's then I suggest that as an AD-ish, I have some issue with that The working group should not be negotiating IPR terms with the IPR holder. If they update their IPR statement, the working group should look at that and revisit any decisions it made. But going back and forth with them before they do that and saying, well, we'll update it if you change your mind, is not the way we're supposed to be working.
I see.
And I'm pretty sure I'm correct about that. Any comments from Alexei, who's officially at, yeah, he has less experience with it than I do. So anyway, I'm quite certain we aren't supposed to be negotiating with them. So you might, my preference for how the working group handles this is to say, please update the IPR statement, and then we will evaluate what you've said and decide what to do.
Okay, fair enough. So, I mean,
Maybe a small point. This was on a base document, and you now split it off this, the section that applies, IPR applies to a
Exactly, we
separate
split
document.
off all the IPR sections into a separate individual document, and
So if they need to file it, they need to file it on the split up part, right?
yeah, it will,
Hopefully.
yeah, exactly.
okay, so point taken. I think we, will follow your guidance and revert to a sort of more regular process of discussing IPR statements that have been made and not that could be made. So we will not ask a specific question today. I think it's useful for people to understand, though, what that potential IPR means, because if they update the IPR, then I think we will ask the question onto the list, right? We will sort of do a test on the list about whether people want to change the approach we had before or stick to the approach we had before.
And I will check now with by Jabber and
Okay.
email and just make sure that I haven't given you bad advice. I'm pretty sure I'm right.
That's a good idea. But I mean, we have time in this working group. I think we'll have remaining time at the end, so we can move on to other things. And if we want to revisit that question, we can come back to it in in 10 minutes or something, in 15 minutes after the other presentations. All right, so let's let's not have a formal hum test about that, but I would just like you to understand what these terms are trying to say, and the implication, which is that there would still be potential royalty claims on the endpoint implementation of the scheme. And then once they update the IPR, if they do, we will call for some sort of vote on the list to see whether we want to revert the earlier decision based on the new IPR, or whether we want to stick to the new decision. Okay, and I guess that's all we can say today, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And right, do you want to discuss the what if scenarios, like if about, it's probably too complicated, right?
Yeah, maybe could a limited view and difficult for me to.
Yeah, I think we should just do step by step. Do okay, so now Frédéric is going to talk about HTTPS delivery. And again, Barry, if you found different information, let us know, and we'll get back to the question.
So hi, I'm Frédéric Fiot. So I'm going to speak about the HTTPS delivery delegation in Cdni. So since the last time we made a couple of changes on the draft, we added the HTTPS delivery delegation requirements. We rephrased the HTTP section, and we added a section on a lurk implementation in Cdni. So for the requirements, we have identified some important requirements on the user side. So as far as the secure delegation is concerned, on the user side, we think that the end user wants to have its content delivered over a CP domain or UCDN domain, whatever the CDN chosen. And of course, obviously, on the user engine side, we have to check whether the cert or domain match. So this is quite complicated when we have several domains involved, several different domains, and several different certificates. This leads us to the requirements on the CDN side. So first requirements, the UCDN must designate the DCDN to deliver the requested content in a secure way. This is basically done using HTTPS redirect. This is more complicated in DNS, of course. The second requirement would be that the UCDN and DCDN must be able to provide the CP and UCDN certificates to the user agent and establish accordingly the TLS session. The third requirement would be that the UCDN should not expose, the content provider certificate and provide keys to the DCDN. And one last requirement, the UCDN must provide the necessary credential to the DCDN when delivering the content to the user agent. So this leads us to a solution that is based on LURC. LURC means limited use of remote keys. So the LURC for CDNI would allow the content provider or the UCDN private keys to remain under the authority of one or the other, while the contents would be delivered by the DCDN with the certificate either from the content provider or the UCDN. We have identified several use cases for CDNI. A nominal case would be that the key server introduced with LURC would remain under the UCDN authority, and a cascaded use case where the key server would remain under the content provider authority. So we here detailed the nominal case for HTTPS delegation using LURC in the CDN interconnection. So here we basically have a delegation from a UCDN to a DCDN, a secure delegation. We don't want, in fact, the UCDN doesn't want to provide its private keys for, let's say, security or legal reasons to the DCDN. And the DCDN, so the UCDN will need a valid certificate received by the content provider, whereas the DCDN would rely on security materials provided by the UCDN for the TLS session establishment. So basically, this would be done using the step 4 and 5. We have the request for the credential and the response from the UCDN key server. The DCDN then will be able to establish a TLS session using the user agent certificate, using, the CP or UCDN certificate and signature. So obviously, this kind of solution impacts a lot of points. It provides advantages, of course. Let's say on security, we avoid to distribute the private keys on all CDNs, which is very interesting. We have less certificates to spread also. And for the architecture part, we introduce an interface that is that doesn't impact the user agent side and nor the TLS session establishment. So basically, this is relatively transparent. But of course, there may be several impacts that should be studied regarding the maybe the metadata interface or the scalability issues. So as the next steps, we may provide other use cases, LURC use cases for CDNI. We may detail those use cases. And also, in a second point, we may also detail token-based solutions that would work jointly with LURC. So I finished. So any comments?
So I was wondering, when we started this work, I think one of the proposals was to work on it, of course, within this group. I think now we have this LURC group, so a lot of the specification work will go to the LURC group, I guess.
Well,
Or
it's a bit early to, I think, to answer this question. I don't know yet whether the LURC group will be a working group.
Just to clarify, LURC is just above for now.
It's still above.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Sanjay here, the BOF for LURC was, not complete, and in fact, attendees asked for another BOF. So it's long ways from actually even forming a group yet.
So, but assuming that it does become a working group, is there anything we would need to specify within the CDNI group to make it work with whatever LURC creates? So
Yeah, I think so, because we may have some impact in CDNI. As I said before, maybe there are impacts on the metadata interface because we need to control the delegation. We need to control whether we can. There are several cases where we need to revoke or not the delegation, and thus this can be controlled on the CDNI part. So we have to control, the UCDN has to control how to accept or not the request from the DCDN, as an example.
Right, so there may be, extensions to the specs to define
yes.
how we can use that, and perhaps some sort of architecture document explaining the whole solution, how it fits together. But I think what we're saying is the bulk of the technical work would be the LURC work, and it's more a matter of how to use it. Now, is it clear that the problem space of LURC is exactly the same, and therefore, if they have a solution, it would pretty much be the right solution from the IETF perspective for that use case?
The only use case they're currently considering is the CDN use case.
So then the answer is like
yes.
Okay. But so I'm sorry. I mean, I didn't follow the LURC BOF as well as I should. So let me ask one more question then. I mean, that was the only use case that is documented, but I mean, presumably there was a BOF.
They presented the use case they had been considering, said
Yes.
there are probably other use cases, but we don't have any in mind right now. And at some point in the BOF, they said, does anybody else have use cases that you want? And there weren't any. So the only use case they're currently considering is the CDN use case, where you're taking my content, he's transmitting it, and you have to decide whether you have authenticated the source. And
Okay.
I don't want to give my private keys to him. So that's the scenario that they're looking at.
I mean, so as much as I, feel good about CDNI driving the IETF directions, at the same time, I'm a little surprised that it's the only one, and that we've even gone that far in creating a BOF just for one use case.
Well, I think it's because people have a sense that there are other use cases for this.
Just
it's just
haven't
that
put their
right
finger on
now,
it.
that's all they're looking at. And as he said, there's there's almost certainly going to be another BOF, and so this will probably be chartered more like August or September, and then, give them time to develop their protocols and whatever. You're looking at a year and a half from now before you see something.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds to me like, clearly there's a forum that is looking at this problem, trying to look at it as a broader problem, even if the main use case for now is Cdni. I think we should just let that follow its course, obviously. What we can do, I would say, is, you're very welcome to continue progress your document, keep track of what happens there, and start thinking about what extensions would be required from this working group. Try to track whether the way LURC shapes up still corresponds to what you want, because maybe when they found a second use case, then they'll say, oh, we'll do it a bit differently, and maybe it doesn't exactly do what you want. I don't know, but keep tracking that in your document. And I mean, are you thinking that there may be another approach than LURC, which is simpler, or less good but simpler? Or are you discussing any of that, or is clearly LURC the right solution if it comes up?
There may be other solution based on token that should be discussed with some persons.
But why would you not discuss these solutions in the context of LURC?
Because no time for that, I think.
Okay, but I mean, if it's a technical discussion on the solution, I think it should happen there now, not here, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so from my perspective, the technical solution is going to be discussed there, or for now they've discussed creating a working group out of the BOF, and if they do, then they'll be responsible for working out the solutions, and it sounds like their solution should address the job for us, and it would be
You think so?
From what I've heard from you guys, yes. I mean, if we're the prime use case, I think they should address that solution.
Okay.
CDN is the use case, right? Not CDNI necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean,
I see.
that is the small distinction there.
I see. No, it's a big distinction.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
got you.
Sanjay Mishra again, sorry, Sanjay. Just wanted to understand, should this scenario that you presented, should that be worked here, or in your view? But I think I'm hearing is that you don't think it should be worked here, but asking the obvious question, why do you think it should not?
So let me rephrase. What I'm concluding from that discussion is that the technical details of how you solve that problem should now be worked should be considered in the LURC BOF and be worked on in the LURC working group if it takes up, because that's going to be its job, okay? And this working group would just be a consumer of that solution, and we would do, what you do when you reuse someone else's protocol. You would just, have a document that says, here's our problem, that's how we use this other existing protocol. Maybe we combine it a bit with this, maybe a bit with that. Maybe we need an extension to the metadata, to the Cdni metadata interface. Maybe we need an extension to the Cdni logging interface. And that document would define all of these extensions, right? But I don't think we should be discussing here the details of the technical solutions, if that's exactly the prerogative of a specific BOF and perhaps working group soon. Yes?
What do you think?
Francois? Is there anyone at the
Sanjay
mic?
Mishra again.
Oh,
Sorry, hang on. Kevin, hang on a second. We have someone at the mic, and then your turn.
okay.
So I was just, the close relationship that I saw here from one standpoint is that the proposal that you have basically talks about the upstream CDN and the downstream CDN, and when that delegation occurs, it's proposing that you could use how to handle the HTTPS delegation between the two CDNs. So I thought that might be a common point which might be of interest here, but I can be wrong. That's at least what I was thinking.
So that's the CDNI use case. That's what you're saying, right? Difference between the CDN case and the CDNI case.
Yes.
Yes, I think we should address this in CDNI. Well, I don't have any answer to that.
But sorry, I mean, I think we are talking cross purposes. When you say we should address this, obviously it's not good enough to converge. It's too vague. So my impression is that, and correct me if I'm wrong because I don't understand the log solution well enough. So, but my impression is that they are solving they're proposing to create a working group that will specify a protocol which allows this delegation that we want. Okay, so I mean, if they are asking that exact question, we should let them decide whether it's a good enough protocol to work on and work the solutions of that specific problem. Then what would be left for the Cdni working group to do is, look at our context, look at this protocol, and decide how we use it in the Cdni context. Right?
Right.
Yes. Sorry, gentleman who came to the mic. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's fine. It's okay.
Okay.
Kevin's first.
Yeah. Kevin, your turn.
I agree with what Francois said. I think it would be interesting, Frederick, if in the next version you look at what changes might be necessary to redirection, logging, and metadata, and FCI for that matter. If we need to advertise what is the address of the server, the key server, right? Or is there something more to that we're missing? I think that detail is what's here. Other than knowing where the key server is there anything that the DCDN really needs to know, regardless of whether the upstream is an upstream CDN or the content provider? It's just an endpoint which it's going to connect to in order to do signing. Is that true?
Not exactly just an endpoint, because in the cascaded use case, we need to have a key server at the CP side. And if the request goes on the DCDN, then maybe we should cascade the request up to the UCDN and next up to the key server. So maybe it's more complex.
Why wouldn't the DCDN that's cascaded down not go directly to the content provider? I'm not sure how us tunneling that would help.
It's a way to do it, but it deserves more study. For the time being, it's a case we try to address.
Okay. I thought from your previous slide it was in the cascaded case you always go to the CDN, but it didn't catch the part where we would be tunneling that through the UCDN. I'm not sure the UCDN would really want to do that, but
okay.
Agreed. If you want to address that in the next version, that might be something we can discuss.
Okay.
Thanks.
This is Barry. More than let's see where they go, I think people who are active here should actively participate in the LURC planning to make sure that they are working on resolving the problems you really want resolved. It doesn't do any good for them to be looking at a use case that isn't quite the use case that you need. So I suggest you actively work with them.
Okay.
And Frederick, it sounds like you're already, to some extent, doing that, right?
Yeah.
Francois, I'll just point out for full disclosure, on the use case draft that Frederick cited, I believe I'm a co-author. And so I was also following, but
great.
I'm not sure that there's a lot more that we have to do other than possibly metadata FCI, right?
Thanks.
Thomas, Kevin, I think the downstream CDN will need the certificate to terminate the TLS tunnel, right? And then call out the alert server to get the signature that corresponds to that certificate. So this certificate needs to be communicated in some way from up to down, and this needs an interface adjustment.
Right, I can see that coming through the metadata and us specifying a metadata object for that.
Sorry, I'm not sure the question was understood properly by the non-native English speakers. Would you mind reformulating your comment? Perhaps if you could speak up and maybe enunciate a little bit better, that would help.
So what I was saying is that the downstream CDN will need the certificate, the signing certificate to terminate the TLS tunnel, right? And that needs to be communicated from upstream or the content provider to downstream. And so that needs the interface adjustment that Cdni may want to take care of.
Yes, okay.
All right, anything else, Frederic? No, anything else?
No, it's okay.
All right. So that's it for our presentation. Barry, did you get any responses to the RPR question?
I did. I put it in the Jabber room. That, yes, I've confirmed that the advice I gave you is correct.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that then. So we basically are done with our agenda. Maybe in terms of conclusions, I think we have a really good set of core specs now that are in the ISG's hands, and hopefully will go through that process successfully relatively shortly. Then we have I guess the URI signing work, which is not quite at the ISG stage, but is progressing well. So we should have really a bulk of the work being done within 1 or 2 meetings, really. So I think we'll have to decide then, what do we do with the working group? In particular, how much work we continue on the HTTPS delegation, and maybe the URI signing for segmented content, right? And if they're not finished, the FCI protocol specs. But I guess, maybe Alexei, what do you think? I mean, for now, we shouldn't necessarily talk about the charter. We'll just continue crank the documents we have, and maybe in 1 or 2 meetings, perhaps we could have a discussion about what we want to do with the charter. Do we keep the working group? Do we, add items, or do we?
Yes, sounds about right. My only other personal comment is, I think I would prefer if the documents already submitted to ISGs, clear ISG and get approved before you submit lots of other new documents to me. But,
Well, when you say other documents, you mean like before we add milestones and work on other things? Is that what you mean, or what do you mean?
Submit for publication.
yes. I mean, it doesn't prevent you doing working group last call and everything.
Sure.
Because I, as far as I'm concerned, I might be paying attention, but I don't really care about state of documents until you ask me to, actually do a redirect review, right, for publication.
But
anyway,
sorry.
I'm just trying to encourage the working group to finish documents already in ISG processing
Absolutely,
first.
Yes.
Before asking me to review more documents.
Yes. Okay. Fine. And that's what we plan to be happening. Yes. Thank you. All right. So we'll, about charter and future of the working group, we'll keep that discussion for maybe 1 or 2 meetings from here. But people are encouraged to think about that. Will they want to continue putting energy in the Cdni working group? Would they want to work on the HTTPS problem? Do they want a solution for segmented content? Things like that, right? And we'll formally raise these questions once we've gone the big batch of core specs through the ISG. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. We're finished a little early, so we'll give you 20 minutes of your time. No, I was here.
I gotta say, this thing is actually working pretty well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somehow magic happened, it sort of automatically.
And the thing over there as well, right? It keeps on turning whenever there's somebody in the microphone. I don't
It's
know if it's automatic or if
pretty
it's
clever.
somebody in the mic. Here's your,
Yeah, okay.